Hello, people of the world watching car-related internet videos. Welcome to this. My 1974 RA21 Toyota Celica ST housing a 2005 Toyota Tundra 2UZ V8. And if you're new here and you're wondering how you got swindled into clicking on this video, up above my head is a link to the last video where I worked on this to catch you up. Picking right up where I last left off in the previous video on this car, I was in the process of doing the rear-mounted battery conversion. Yeah, like that. Yeah, I need room for this to be all open. And going with the theme of everything on this project, I gotta design this from scratch myself. Oh man, that is not gonna be easy. This is gonna be a tricky one to do clean, but I think I can pull it off. How in the unfun puzzle did this thing get in here? The fact that it's difficult to remove is not a bad thing though, because you definitely don't want this panel bouncing and rattling around in the trunk, which it should not do, and mounting the battery on top of it will make it even more secure. Now you can see why this is a little tricky to do. I have a giant void down here for the jack, a hole right here for the spare, and then this area right here has a giant frame rail going through here, so there's very little area that I can actually put hardware. Some of you may have noticed I'm utilizing an AGM battery, which has an advantage for the fact that it does not require ventilation like a lead acid battery would. There, that shouldn't go anywhere. My flashlight. Nutsert number 2. I had to straddle the frame rail right here. The other one is in the center. You can't get to the bottom of it. That's why I chose the Melee Design battery box. It's honestly one of the best battery boxes on the market, if you ask me. You can see there's all kinds of slots down here to mount it in various locations. So it makes sense to do this with a mixture of nutserts as well as one physical nut on the bottom. I'm trying to be serious. And yeah, my inner trunk panels, which are powder-coated black stainless, match the battery box perfectly. I was waiting until I cut and buff this thing, but this has to happen now. These glitches you see on the screen here, oh, that's perfect. Yeah, those aren't special effects. That was an unfortunate situation. My old lens was cracked, so brand new Toyota Kyoto made in Japan lens. While filming this video, I lost about 3 hours of footage because I had an SD card corrupt, but luckily I check every couple hours in case situations like this pop up. Literally looks brand new again. The slight downside of these inner trunk panels, it makes it a little bit hard to change a bulb, but I'd rather have that than an outward dent. That's sweet. This adhesive foam block will keep that panel from denting the inside of the fender. Shapes, shapes, shapes. Yep, holes still line up perfectly. Since these RA chassis Celicas have a trunk-mounted fuel tank and I'm doing a trunk-mounted battery, that sounds like a recipe to blow up if you don't do it right. I don't want this thing to be all hacked up, so I'm going to utilize this slot to my advantage.
What did you just say?
Wow. Wow, this is sweet. Don't act like you didn't see this part coming. The box goes there, right there. Put this little rubber pad, keep it from moving around. In case the nutserts ever failed, which is not going to happen, there's a physical nut under here to hold that battery box from coming up. There you go. 3 M6 bolts and 1 M10, which goes into the recessed pocket that you can't get to the back side of. There, that'll work. And just in case someone asks, yes, I'm gonna loom this, but I wanna make sure the car starts and runs first, and I'm not putting the ground on just yet. Wind extraction, commence. It's that following day. Now that I have power out back, I can route it up front and see what happens. And the smartest way to do this is it's like opening a series of floodgates, one by one, to make sure you don't destroy a village. Conveniently, this car had a CB radio mounted just to the left of the steering column up under the dash where all the engine wiring harnesses and the factory fuse box were. And conveniently, that is the exact same size as the new standalone ECU. so that's its new home. And that's convenient for diagnostics because that's the location of most modern car OBD2 ports. This is where neatness is gonna start coming into play. What a weird place to get a blowout.
I understand your frustration.
What I'm creating here is one out of a series of chains of grounds throughout the engine bay. With the one from the block to the frame being the largest diameter because that is going to be the one that the starter will utilize. So these right here are all the ECU grounds. This is just for all the engine sensors. It'll then get linked to another ground that goes down to the cylinder head and then another down to the block before finally making its way to the frame rail. Man, that thing takes a lot of heat to shrink. Usually it's the other way around. Use a genuine Toyota bolt. I'm surprised nobody mentioned this in the past 2 videos, but I'm not really a fan of this fuse box, how it has the terminals on the side with no protection. So I did a bunch of digging around on the internet. Made in Italy. And lucky for me, the company that makes these fuse boxes has a hell of a lot of options. Someone got that. Dimensionally the same, but I like that way better. Each one of the terminals is shielded all the way around with plastic, and then once these are fully loomed with heat shrink and tightly bound together so there's no movement in the wire, it'll be perfect. I have officially used up all of my heat shrink. This is rather unfortunate. One last piece of spicy robot sausage left to go. That's a perfect definition for this cable, spicy robot sausage. Can't do it like Macho Man Randy Savage. Snap it to a Slim Jim. Oh yeah. I wish a company like Slim Jim would sponsor me. I would gladly tell people to snap into a Slim Jim wearing some spandex and sunglasses. Tech tip, when trimming your carpet near the door sill area, always account for extra material for spicy robot sausage. Alright, power cable loomed. Sorry you can't see anything I'm doing. I have a fat head. Since this is gonna be located down under the carpet by the firewall, it's gonna have a boot. If you can't see this, that's a good thing. That means it'll be hidden under the carpet. I think it's time. That right there is a frame rail. And me and me get dirt all over. Finally, after weeks of wiring, it's time to hopefully not let the smoke out. This thing's starting to look like a parrot that eats rocks. I don't know how well it's gonna cut. Also, a side note, if your parrot is eating rocks, you might wanna have it see a psychiatrist. Kind of works. Just like the main battery power cable, the ground is made out of 1/aught welding wire as well, so it's super flexible. I feel like I saw that in an episode of Ricky Lake once. My parrot's eating rocks and I don't know why. Don't break it out. This around the ground, just to make it look good. I at least get to finalize one piece of wiring for this car, the ground cable. It looks fairly OEM like you'd see on a brand new Toyota. I got a stainless threaded nut cert down inside there, and it's just a short run right here up to the ground terminal. Ooh, I want to touch it so bad and see what happens. Now day number 3, and it's time to see if I can set my multimeter on fire. I am now enabling the most expensive fuse ever, so I can see if I'm going to draw any current just from hooking up the fuse box. This is simulating connecting the ground to the battery, and go. Good. No current draw. Alright, it's safe to connect the ground. Nothing. Alright, so since I essentially engineered the wiring of this car myself, utilizing wiring from a 2005 Tundra, a 1985 Celica, and a 1974 Celica with the standalone engine management, I need to systematically add my power circuit by adding the fuses to make sure all those circuits are good individually before I can then try to eventually start the car. Bulkhead is the next spot in the system, and I have 12 volts present. Now will be the fuse going to the inside, 12 volts present. Now at this current point, I should have 12 volt potential at the ammeter as well as the ignition waiting for me to turn the key. 12 volts present, that's good. I'm sorry if this is hard to read, my multimeter has seen better days. Additionally, that 12 volts will be present at one of the terminals on my starter relay, awaiting for the command from the key to start the car. Good. Alright, these are all supposed to have voltage. First fuse. Come on, man. Third fuse up. Ah! We have life! It's only the seatbelt warning light, but that is life. The Celica is coming back to life. Next is the horn circuit, except the horn is in a box over there. So there's not gonna be any horn, but next is the heater and gauges. This is for the gauges. Oh, my fuel gauge is working now. That's awesome. So no fuses blew. That's good. That's a good sign. It's hard to test anything because like most of the car is taken apart still. I would say this is a success so far. I initially had planned to power my engine bay fuse and relay box in addition to the cooling fan relay and fuse box with one single strand of 6 AWG coming from the bulkhead right here on the side by the fuses. But that's gonna be a pain to try to split that to the two different fuse boxes. So I've opted to do instead is run 3 individual 10 AWG wires. Let's melt a glove to my finger. Which is the same as Toyota did for this factory fuse box, as well as 2 additional ones, one for each one of the cooling fans. Power circuit. Originally I was gonna modify the alternator and set it up as a 1-wire alternator, but I chose to keep it factory and do it how Toyota would have done it. Which is how I've designed all the wiring for this engine thus far. Yep, that's perfect right there. So wire number 4, which used to be yellow with a green stripe on the Tundra, I made it yellow because I wanted to make it somewhat close. That is for the idiot light on the dash. Okay, number 4. Check my tech data. If you look here on the 2005 Toyota Tundra factory wiring schematic, you can see there's junction J12 sending a lead to the integration relay. That is the circuit that ties into the ECU, so it knows what the alternator is doing, thus where I am going to send that signal to my standalone ECU. IG circuit going to engine fuse. Ironically, this wire is black and yellow on an 85 Celica as well as a 2005 Tundra. It's almost the same. It's just there's an extra fuse on the circuit going to the dummy light, and it's missing one on the alternator sensing circuit on an 85 Celica. Not like this is a difficult circuit, but I overcomplicate things in my head because I like to get it right the first time. Come out to your hole. Fuck off. There we go. Perfect. That goes right there. You have no idea how hard it was to find this Yazaki plug for that fuse box because I was missing it. I literally laid in bed until like 2:30 in the morning searching for this online, and I finally found it. It was one of the hardest things I ever had to find on the internet. Oh, that was great. I only have 2, so I better not screw this up. Oh man, that's hard to squeeze. That's it. That's the power for the engine fuse box. Things get a little bit weird on the alternator sensing circuit because the 85 Celica fuse box is wired slightly different than how the Tundra is on its alternator sensing circuit. Either way, they're both protected by a fusible link. That's the difference. The whole purpose of the circuit is just for the internal regulator in the alternator to just sense the voltage. There you go. There's only 3 wires that are needed for this. There is a 4th terminal, and I believe that's a ECU monitoring one, but I'm tying that into the yellow circuit. You have no idea how time consuming this is. Lastly, a ground. Obviously I need a belt still, but at least the alternator's plugged in. That's it. That's everything that goes to that fuse box. Everything else was for pop-up headlights and a bunch of tech that this car doesn't have.
It's a Toyota that makes even ordinary coming and going something to look forward to.
So inside this box that does not contain robot sex toys, I don't know what those are, This is a throttle pedal assembly out of a Lexus LS430. Also, it's the 4th day in this video. Take note though, where it mounts to the floor is identical to how this car is from the factory. And you can see the upper portion bolts to the firewall right there with that gold zinc bracket and the little black rod coming off of it. Wow, the spacing is almost the same. So in the RA chassis Celica, this is where it bolts to the firewall. This was in the engine bay, and this is connected to the pedal right here. You can see the rod length between the Celica and the LS430 is almost the same. Additionally, the bolt spacing is almost the same too. And the fact that this pedal mechanism goes to a 3UZ, the 4.3 liter version of this engine, which my intake manifold and throttle body came off of, is sheer luck. So if it were bolted there and you were pushed, oh yeah, that's the way it has to go. Do the holes line up for the bottom of the pedal? It's kind of impossible to get my camera down there for you to see, but the hole spacing for the bottom of the pedal is literally only half a hole off. The hard part is though, I need to find a 6-pin plug that fits this Denso sensor. Many of you will argue this is not important right now, but I argue that this wire is important. I forgot to install it when I put the dash back together, and it's critical because battery, ignition on. I got radio, FM radio, and Conrad tape player? I think it's a tape player, it's an 8-track. Now the drive-by-wire circuit requires a little bit more wiring than I was anticipating. I have to wire it to a relay, and I don't think it's because this draws a lot of current. I think it's so you can isolate it and command it individually within the tuning software. I did plan for this already, and I started wiring it in right here. So it already has its ground. It's a 12 gauge wire with a 15 amp fuse. Generally you can do like 20, 25 amps on a 12 gauge, depending on the length and the temperature. There. Now it's got its own dedicated power source. Obviously I don't want my pedal circuit to have power all the time. So this relay is gonna get tied into my ignition main relay. And then that will slide in right there. Which this black with a yellow stripe wire is what is going to the coil side of my ignition main relay. Once that wire is finally tied into all these 3 relays, then when I turn the key into the ignition position, everything will be able to fire up engine-wise, and also I'll provide power to the ECU and finally be able to test that. That'll be my ignition 7.5 amp fuse. And then one last relay in the engine bay for the cooling fans. So there's 7 relays total I had to wire up to this. Based on the feedback I see from you guys in the comment section and the fact that these videos are getting watched means a lot of you actually have been enjoying these wiring videos, which is good because it's super stressful to do this and film it on the internet for people to judge you. The fuel injectors arrived in the mail for this thing yesterday, and they were the last part I was waiting on for the engine to be able to get that thing ready for me to turn the key. With the exception, obviously, of putting some coolant and oil in this thing and mounting the radiator and putting a belt on it. But once this car fires up, I'm immediately pulling the engine bay out because I got to send all kinds of stuff to powder coating, bodywork, and paint this bay, paint the underside of this hood, and the underside of this trunk lid, which has been driving me insane looking at this. Then stuff can be assembled permanently and not held together with zip ties, because I know a lot of people ask about that also, like when I'm going to loom stuff, and I'm kind of doing stuff temporarily. But also, this video was sponsored by my new SNT merch. The link is on the video description below, and Karen did a pretty good job at designing a new logo for me, so shout out to Karen. And yeah, if you want to support the channel, that is how. And I'll see you guys soon with another video. Bye!